Hey guys, how you going? It's VaulSC here. Today I'm going to talk about my preparation for a recent ITS tournament event where I was playing infiNity with the Combined Army, the vanilla combined experience using the EI aspects, the Avatar in one of my lists and the Anathaematic in the other list. So very exciting stuff. Now, this was a one-dayer ITS event. It was only 3 rounds, and there were only 8 people participating. So not your huge, sprawling 70-player, 100-player kind of event. Very small affair, and these kinds of events are decided usually by the player who wins 3 games. Although it must be said that you can actually win 2 games with massive victories and lose the 3rd game. And if you are up against somebody else who wins 3 games but all minor victories and you have more objective points, you can still win the tournament, which is a little bit quirky. In terms of ITS, I think that ITS still has a long way to go in terms of being a really good, well-optimized, competitive kind of system. I think probably the best kind of tournament is one that goes for 5 rounds but doesn't have more than, say, 30, 32 players kind of thing, where you really have a nice clear winner with somebody who wins all of their games and probably massive victories, rather than, say, 70 to 100 players with only 5 rounds. Although those tournaments are good and there's great things about them, obviously it doesn't feel like great to have a whole bunch of people who are undefeated at the end. Anyway, I'm digressing. This video is going to be about my 2 lists, my preparation as a Combined Army player for these 3 specific missions, which will be Acquisition, Frontline, and Unmasking. So those are the 3 games that are going to be played, and I've decided on Combined Army for that. So without too much further ado, let's jump into what I was running and why. So after a bit of thinking and playtesting and army list building, I thought that I might try out the Avatar for this event. And let's just jump over to my list number 1, known as Lolburgers, where I am running the Avatar. And this list generally builds itself. You want the Avatar in there, you want the Speculo Killer because of the synergy you have with Strategos level 3 and the ability to place an impersonation marker when you can see all of their deployed models. I find that you need all of the chaff, the cheerleaders, because you don't have points of much else. I go for the Kurgat because really, what is your Dr. Worm going to be using with the Doctor ability? Probably not that much, whereas when the Avatar is reduced to unconscious, at that point you don't really get any rerolls anyway. The +1 whip from the Dr. Worm over the Kurgat is not that great, and really the Kurgat is there just as a backup, more so if the Avatar gets immobilized or isolated somehow and you want to bring him back in the game that way. But I like the Kurgat. 17 points, definitely worth saving a 4-point there over the Dr. Worm in my view, and he comes with anti-personnel mines as well, which the Dr. Worm doesn't have, and he's a Morat, meaning that he can go in against jammers and come out unscathed. But the real eyebrow raiser of this list, there's 2 important points here which I'm doing, which I haven't done before. One of them is the Shrouded Mine Layer, and I've talked about this in previous videos, where if you place the Dazer at some point in total cover where your opponent can't shoot it, and if your opponent really is committing to just shooting your Avatar, that -1 dice can mean the difference between victory and defeat, and like a really powerful first turn Alpha Strike shooting into your Avatar and a totally wasted turn, giving you a massive advantage. So obviously there are still things where you kind of need to hide and cower away from, like if they're running the Cien Warrior in a smoke cloud, Imperial Service styles, 5 dice down to 4, that's still probably going to ruin your day. Marut probably will still do pretty well, even though it has 3 dice because it's 15s versus 15s, and it's got armor piercing, which is an important point. But a lot of the other smaller stuff, like the Kreezer, and just your average grey rifle HMG, well, actually that's got AP as well, but any sort of TR bot, anything that just has a basic say Mukhtar with a Red Fury, having that Dazer there is going to make a massive difference, and you can actually deploy your Avatar watching the table, something you ordinarily wouldn't do with an ARO piece, and just use him as that big boss guy at the back. And with tactical awareness, once it becomes his turn, it's time to push out and do some damage. That is huge. But even more specialized, and really the defining characteristic of this kind of avatar list is my choice to have Kodali in there. So Kodali is very, very strong in combination with a Speculo killer. And of course this list is naturally going to be running a Speculo killer anyway. So for the longest time I've been thinking about the theory around putting all three of those key pieces in your list. You've got the Avatar for Strategos level 3, and obviously the very powerful ARO piece, and the Speculo Killer for deploying right next to the deployment zone and putting smoke down, and then Kodali, able to actually come on the side of the table inside of smoke. You can't drop down into the smoke cloud, but I believe you can deploy on the side of the table and just be touching the smoke, and I think that is legal. And assuming they've got no MSV2 watching you, you can just push out and start shooting. And the really abusive strategy with Kodali is to move her within 8 inches of an enemy model that must choose between a reset, change face ARO, or losing their ARO at that point if they don't make a decision. And then you shoot at them with the assault pistols close range, which is really brutal because they have no opportunity to shoot back at Kodali, regardless of whether they have a flamethrower, chain rifle, or whatever it may be. So if you can wrangle that, that is extremely powerful. But even if you don't, Kodali may well show up later in the game. She may drop in at the back of the line if you really want to risk that. There are plan Bs and plan Cs. So the potential of this list is just really strong and really devastating, but you still have to play well. You still have to be very careful because, again, there's that fragility. If your opponent starts dealing with the Speculo and Kodali and the Avatars getting outmaneuvered, smoke grenades going down, he can't see through them, can't be everywhere at once, not great. Also, this list is not really very specialist-oriented. The Shrouded Mine Layer, not a specialist. Everybody else, not a specialist. We've basically got the Kurgat, who's really just sitting there in your deployment zone, and the Steldron from the Avatar, which is not great. But coming back to the mission lineup, we're going to be playing Frontline and Acquisition, which don't really need a lot of specialists. And then for Unmasking, that's when I'm going to go with my alternate list. So, yeah, I've been thinking about this list for a while now. It's very powerful. Obviously, the Echidrons and Ardrones just take up, slots and give you a regular order, and it can be tough. If something drops down behind your Avatar, you might be in trouble if you haven't got the right angle with your flash pulses. This list got no hackers or anything like that. Your days are obviously just the boarding shotgun there. Sometimes you won't get a lot of mileage out of them. But if you are able to take the fight to them with Kodali in the early part of the game, you might be able to eliminate some things which were otherwise going to have been a threat for your Avatar, and then you come and crush them. So let's say you chip away at their link team with Kodali, or you trade the Speculo for something important, or if you use the cloud for Kodali to ignore any other arrows, but you target their Ruishi or their Sien Warrior, whatever it may be, and beat them in a shootout because it's your turn, then they may have nothing left to take on the Avatar with. So that's the overall strategy. So with Acquisition being the first mission, he's going to be the data tracker for sure. Avatar, don't forget, 11 orders, including Strategos level 1, plus Tactical Awareness. Can't believe that Corvus Belli has given it that. So you could have a 12-order turn right off the bat, just moving and attacking, or you can save up your orders and have quite a lot of resource towards the end of the game. Now, Acquisition and Frontline are both missions where I feel that if you just ignore the scenario and go and crush your opponent turn after turn after turn, or leave them with very little, you can still win even though you're taken first because they've got so little left to punch back at you. With Acquisition, if you've got your Avatar data tracker standing in the middle of the table onto that tech coffin or whatever it's called, and it's watching everything, they're in a lot of trouble because they move out with camera markers. He's very good at discovering them. Anything that's not a marker can be shot at by its HMG very powerfully. They have to come towards a Sepsitor, which may be a problem if they've got a cube. And they may well have run out of orders because Kodali and that has done too much damage. And for the other consoles, really, you just put your normal models base to base with them. Maybe the Kurgat turns one of them on, and you hope for like a 8 or 9 point objective win. Possibly not 10, but there you have it. And Frontline, very similarly, with Frontline, it's a terrible mission to go first on if you're not going to do damage, and if you're not going to sort of get your troops squarely in the right areas, because your opponent can then pick and choose which strip to dominate. But the thing is, again, you're attacking from the very first order, either with the Speculo or Kodali in most cases. And if you're really just shutting them down so much that they've got very little stuff at the end of the game, or if they're going into retreat or lost lieutenant, which will often happen if you've done that much damage, having the Avatar standing in the middle strip and all of your baggage bots in your strip closest to your deployment zone, and maybe the Speculo killer in impersonation state in their strip closest to their deployment zone, they may have nothing left to really deal with that, and you win very easily as a result. But if for some reason they've gone straight for first turn, you're defending with the with the Avatar and the Dazer situation, the baggage bots, the flash pulses, Kodali possibly coming down on the table when it's your turn, and if you can survive long enough and you have an Avatar left at the end of the game, Avatar quite easily moves into the correct strip and puts its points there, 137, and it's going to do really, really well. So that's the overall strategy for me trying to beat these RTS missions and beat opponents. I do want to point out that even though there are only 8 players at this event, we will see, players who are pretty decent at infiNity at the moment. So Hexer, my buddy who is on my internet channel quite a lot, YouTube channel, he'll be playing, so he's very, a strong player, probably, next to myself, strongest in New Zealand. Then we've got Jed, aka What Is Tactics, doing pretty well. Garth, who's won the last 2 tournaments, aka Hayoung, or Alfs on the forums. So it's not going to be like an easy walkover event, even though there's 3 games. If I get an easier opponent round 1, maybe I'll win that one, but to win the following 2 rounds is still going to be tough. So this Avatar strategy is how I'm planning on doing it for the first 2 games. So that was the LOL Burgers list. The other list is called Rafflecopters, and it is my Anathaematic list. And my reason for playing the Anathaematic was a practice game I had recently where you guys saw it on my YouTube channel where I was running the Anathaematic and the Torontid and the Dazer and the Noctifer, and it was Unmasking, and I saw firsthand how effective the Anathaematic can be in that mission because it's a hacker with a sucker punch. It may encounter other hackers in the midfield. When it moves out, it's got a very, very, very high chance of pressing the buttons on the consoles. The mission's not about points, so if you lose them towards the end of the game, doesn't matter. Mnemonica can transfer the lieutenant ability to somewhere else, which can be really useful. So thinking about that more and more and more, I realized that with the mission Unmasking, the Anathaematic might be a good way to go. So I've built this list around him. I've got Hacker Anathaematic because very good for the scenario. A Malignos Killer Hacker because, again, moving out with this guy early in the game is going to allow me to press buttons very quickly, but also put a Dazer in the middle of the table if needed, or mines, and hopefully find out where that designated target is for later in the game when I go after him. The Crackgot Red Fury is a very powerful data tracker because he might roll up the metachemistry he needs to get really, really fast to traverse the length of the battlefield to find his prey. A Red Fury, very reliable mid-range gun, and if he gets closer, then the Berserk or the chest mines are likely to destroy a designated target very, very reliably. You've got your Icadron cheerleaders, Q-Drone HMG. I love taking the Q-Drone along with the Anathaematic because you're not additionally having to take another hacker in your list to support it with supportware, whereas the Anathaematic can use his lieutenant order to just chuck assisted fire on the Q-Drone, and there is that synergy there, so I like that. Liberto Mine Layer, again, too good not to take. Every faction that can take this profile should because it's only 10 points, and it's hugely useful with Dogged, Chain Cult, Light Shotgun, Mines, Mine Layer. Greif Operator, an interesting one. My thinking with this is that I could deploy it into the area nearest my opponent's deployment zone. There is an exclusion zone, but I can bypass that with impersonation, and I can put it near to where some of the potential designated targets are. So the Malignos moves up first turn, reveals one of the targets, and then I could shoot it with the Greif Operator. And if I know that I'm likely to uncover his actual designated target for that turn, I could deploy the Greif Operator in normal trooper state rather than marker state and nominate him as my data tracker and then shoot the enemy model, and that would put me up 5 objective points straight away, which is a big, big advantage. Flashball Spot, Kurgat again, still not taking the Doctor, and that's because the Doctor's not that helpful against the Anathaematic, who's just got 2 wounds in NWI, so once he's dead, he's dead. The Q-Drone only needs an engineer. The Kurgat's cheaper than the Doctor, and I haven't really got much else here which really requires it, like Noctifer, not really going to use it because of Dogged. Malignos has already got a auto med kit. If I was running a list that had something like Mark Rep Tracker with HMG, I wouldn't want to rely on the auto med kit for that, and I want to revive it. or if I was running something else which is going to be hanging out in the deployment zone with a big beefy gun like a Sogarat. Not that I'd run that unit, but just you get the picture, right? So if you're not really expecting to do any doctoring, the Kurgat's just better than Dr. Worm because he's got mines and he's cheaper. So if you want to save points that way, you can do it. And I've even got a slave drone so that he can be in a couple of points at once, and he's still got the ability to remove isolation or immobilization from, say, Anathaematic or something like that if it comes up. And opting not to go for limit insertion, which I usually do with Anathaematic, this time I'm going to have that secondary group just to hide the Noctifer in there and have the Tiger Creatures and Imitrons. And the Tiger Creatures, with their 6th sense level 1, I feel that this is the way to go for this mission because you're wanting to put them out there next to where your HVTs are. They can use their 6th sense level 1 and help to defend those HVT and decoys when your opponent comes knocking on the door to come around and destroy them. So I thought that would be a really big deal. Also, Tiger Creatures, you know, there might be a situation where you have enemy hackers in the midfield, enemy defenders in the midfield, and you can make those trades, allowing you to then push forward with something like the Malignos or the Anathaematic or the Krakot to get into enemy lines. So that chaff for chaff warband versus warband trading is very good. And having the double action Berserk, you know, really reliable way of actually clearing the thing that your opponent was hoping to deter you with and then getting over there. So this has been a look at the strategy I'm going to be using for this 3-game tournament. We're going to play Acquisition, Frontline, and then Unmasking. It's most likely going to be Avatar, Anathaematic in that order, but depending on the table layout, matchup, opponent, I might end up running the Avatar only once and the Anathaematic for the other 2 missions. I can't see a situation where I'd run the Avatar for all 3, just because for Unmasking, it's just really awkward to get up there and press the consoles with the Kurgat or the Steldron. Neither of them are hackers. Neither of them are particularly models that you want to use for button pressing. And then you've got to move over towards where the actual decoys are hiding, which I still don't really want to do. So Avatar, probably not for the 3rd game. Possibly Anathaematic list for Frontline, if I'm up against an opponent who's likely to be very evasive and that the Kodal is not going to be very good against. Possibly Anathaematic will show up game 2 for, game 1 for, well, either game 1 or game 2. I could end up running Anathaematic for all 3 games, but hoping to get the Avatar in there since he's specifically designed for it. And I want to see how he goes, to be honest, with that combination of Avatar Dazer, Kodali Speculo with Strategos level 3, really rounding everything else out and supporting what I want to. So that's been some thinking behind my combined army list building for this specific ITS event. Again, it would probably be fairly different if this was a 5-game event and I had more missions to try and account for. I would have to sort of spread out the versatility of what these lists can achieve, but with only 3 games to play, I can afford to be a little more specialized and specific about what I want to do with these very powerfully focused lists. So I hope you guys enjoyed this look into the ITS Showdown event, and I'll be posting 3 battle reps in the next days showing you how these lists actually did. So stick around and have a look at how they do.